to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops. And Omari Sankofa II is not with us today. We had a little bit of a booking issue here, some scheduling stuff. And so Omari is in a very important Detroit Free Press meeting right now. So Wes is with us. Always want to thank Wes, and make sure you're listening to him and Blake over on the Pin Down on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel. Make sure you're checking out all of the work on the Detroit Free Press. Make sure you go subscribe to the Motor City Hoops Substack, where I'm going through my off-season preview series in terms of looking at potential off-season acquisitions. A lot of names that Keith Smith and I talk about today, you might find over there, because we are joined by our favorite guest, a good friend, Keith Smith of the Front Office Show, of Spot Track, of everything, at Keith Smith NBA on Twitter and Blue Sky. And so, Keith, thank you for joining us yet again. How are things going? You're talking before. You just got back from vacation.
Yeah, I snuck in a quick little break to, we took a quick cruise for 4 nights, and was nice and relaxing, and my head is reset, and I'm ready to dive fully into the off season, as if I wasn't already, but I'm even more ready now.
So let's look back just a little bit here before we go fully into the off season. Like, what were your thoughts on the Detroit Pistons season, the playoffs, how things, because some of those things are going to play into how this offseason looks for the Pistons. 60 wins, 1 seed, losing game 7 of the semifinals. Where are you at on where this team was and went and now is?
Yeah, I think if you kind of start with where we thought they'd be at the start of the season, vastly outplayed those expectations for me. 2 seasons ago, really nice step forward season, got into the playoffs, gave the Knicks a run in the first round. Then you kind of go into the next level of best team in the conference, one of the best records in the league, really played well. And I get it. I fully understand playoffs were a disappointment. Getting stretched by the Magic in the first round, tough. I kind of look at it as the Magic weren't really your normal 8 seed. They should have been a better team throughout the course of the regular season. So that's part one of that. Then you get into second round battle with Cleveland. Ultimately, they fall. And I know it feels probably disappointing because this was the 1 seed. I think what we ultimately saw was Pistons probably played a little bit over their heads in the regular season and then underachieved a little bit in the postseason, which means they probably landed right about where they should have, all things considered, which, if you kind of follow the Spurs are breaking this right now as we speak, but the traditional path of success is get to the playoffs, win a series, then you really go forward and really compete for it. So I think they're in a really good place, with things moving forward. And I think it was, if you really look at the totality of it, a really successful season.
Yeah, I mean, to your point there, Keith, I think we're finding out very quickly that Victor Wembanyama also isn't your traditional face of the franchise, right? I feel very comfortable saying Cade Cunningham is the face of the Detroit Pistons franchise. And as great as I think Cade Cunningham is, Victor Wembanyama is just a little bit more generational in terms of his impact on both ends of the court. To be, that's a whole other offensively, but just his ability to do things on both ends at the level that he does and impact the way he's able to play. I go back to where
when a guy catches in the mid post and turns, pivots into a 1-step 2-hand dunk, I don't even know what you do anymore with that. I've been saying for 3 years now, Victor Wembanyama leads the league, and me pausing, rewinding, and saying, what just happened plays? Because it just, half of it doesn't make sense. So yeah, truly special player.
I remember having this conversation, and I hope I don't kind of sell out Wes and Omari here, but I feel like we all had this conversation before the year of what can not happen in 25, 26. And I think we all kind of agreed is there can't be a step back. Wes can nod his head here, but I think we all agree at least has to be the same of what we saw the year before. And if they take a step forward, and Wes is nodding, so I think that this was a conversation we all had in terms of at least get back to the first round. And really, you probably do need to make it past the first round, but you, at the very worst, you cannot let it be a step back where you're a play-in team that loses in the first round. I know they almost did, but ultimately they didn't, Keith. And to your point, My argument was Detroit went 3-0 in the first round against the 8-seed Magic. Like the actual 8-seeded Magic, the reason they were the 8 seed was because of injuries. And when they got injured in that series, they went 3-0 against that roster. I don't know. I that's where I'm at. Well, any other thoughts on the playoffs, how things went, anything like that before we push into the offseason specifically for the Pistons?
Yeah, I think the regular season should have answered it, but Cade Cunningham, full-blown superstar. No questions asked anymore. No one should ever ask those questions again. We should all be there now. Guy you can truly build everything around. Like he is your guy. And I know we're gonna do a lot of Jalen Duren, so we'll leave that. And then I think it just playoffs expose what do you need to be better. Pistons need at least one more on-ball creator, and they need more shooting. And then I think it's hard because you don't want to sacrifice what makes you special, which is a lot of their toughness and the way they defend and the way they get after it, to add things that maybe run counter to that but fill other holes. But yeah, I think they're in a place where they should feel pretty good, about going into the offseason and kind of firming up and filling some of their holes and being able to move forward.
Let's just have the tough conversation now, Keith. Let's get it out of the way, because I do think that this question or the answer to this question does end up driving a lot of what happens this offseason for the Pistons. And I first want to thank everybody that's here watching live. I know it's over most people's lunch break. If it's not over your lunch break and you're at work, we appreciate you so much. Please do not get in trouble at work, but we appreciate you being here. And we do have your questions. We see that. Wes will throw them up on the screen whenever they kind of hit the right time of the episode. Let's just have the Jalen Duren conversation, Keith. But I don't want to dive fully into the contract yet and what that means and all that, because quite honestly, his contract number doesn't affect the offseason quite as much as what some other stuff does, because they can do it after the fact. Now, it still does matter in terms of the tax line and the apron and moving forward. But somebody says, I'm definitely at work, but I don't care. Indonesia,
That's the way
let's go.
to do it.
11 p.m. in Indonesia. Thank you so much for joining us. Just where are you at as a basketball player, as his role on this team with Jalen Duren after the regular season, and then what we saw through 14 games of the playoffs this year?
Yeah, I know the playoffs were rough, but I'm a big Jalen Duren fan. Have been for years now. I remember coming on here when people were like, you're going to pay Jalen Duren more than Jaden Ivey? You're crazy. You don't know. You don't watch, and all these things. And I felt like a couple years ago, people had missed, maybe it's because the team was so awful. Jalen Duren had taken real steps forward. He had kind of added a little bit of ability to, at least, even if he wasn't always making the pass, he was kind of trying to make passes on the short roll. I think his defense had taken major steps forward, where he's no longer just this. Everything was on instinct and he didn't know how to execute in a scheme. Now I think he's a perfectly valid defender. I think he's never going to make all the defense, because one, it's just hard to do that. But I think he's a good player on that end. And I think he took big steps forwards offensively. I don't know that Jalen Duren's ever going to be a shooter. I don't think we're going to see him taking a bunch of threes. That said, former Piston Andre Drummond is now apparently the greatest corner three-point shooter the league's ever seen.
What about mid-range, Keith? What do you think about Jalen Duren's mid-range possibility?
Yeah, I think there is potential, because I think his form is fairly solid. He's not awful on free throws. I think you could see him 10, 15 feet, just as kind of one other thing that he can kind of do there. But I like the way he works with Cade Cunningham a lot. I think they have really good timing together, the way they work. I love his activity on both ends of the floor. I think this is a guy who, if he put his mind to it and didn't have other guys who steal, and I'm very much putting steal in quotes, rebounds, he could lead the league in rebounding, because I just think he's got that kind of ability. So yeah, I'm a big Jalen Duren fan. I have been for a while, and I'm not moving off it because he had a disappointing playoffs. Do you know what? He was really good in the playoffs against the Knicks. So which one's more real? I know it feels like it's real right now, but I don't know. We'll see with that.
I do want to ask you this question, because I think this question then does drive us into the offseason and kind of where Detroit needs to go. And again, I'm going to save the Jalen Duren actual contract numbers for later in the episode, because order of operations, one, then you guys have to stay and listen to hear the number. But two, order of operations says that will be one of the final things that actually gets done. It may be agreed upon before, but order of operations is something we're going to say multiple times in this episode. And ultimately, that's the final number that will most likely actually hit the transaction wire is that number. Joy says, hello guys from Albania, 612 there. I love that people continue to let us know what time it is. Like, I love that that's become the thing with the Pistons Pulse is we can't figure out what time it is where you're at. So you just let us know. I very, very much appreciate all of you. So let's go here, Keith. Detroit again is in a very unique situation. They can operate as an under the cap team or an over the cap team based on just a few decisions. So, a YouTube user, is there any chance the Pistons decide to go under the cap based on free agency trade? Would Tobias take the room? So just start us there, Keith. Like, what is a reasonable number they could get to without just completely destroying the depth of the roster? And then what is the other path and the kind of the pros and cons of over versus under?
Yeah, I'm going to round a little bit, but 30 million is a reasonable number that the Pistons can get to that allows them to keep basically everybody who is under contract for next year, including picking up Dennis Jenkins' team option, then keeping Jalen Duren's $19.4 million cap hold on the books. But that is wiping away Tobias Harris, wiping away Kevin Huerter, wiping away Malik Beasley. I know that's still kind of floating out there. You're then waiving, and believe that figure factors in a wave stretch of Duncan Robinson. So that kind of gets you a little bit more money there. Well, quite a bit more money there. Moving on from Tolu Smith and moving on from Paul Reed. So essentially you're left with all the guys who are under contract, Dennis Jenkins, Jalen Duren. That does still include the first round pick they have. And then you got to fill out the roster from there. So that's about 30 million. What I think with that, rather than kind of start rifling through a bunch of targets right now, which we could do later if you want to.
Yep.
I think if you see the Pistons go the cap space route, right, we start getting reported moves that they're waiving Duncan Robinson and going to waive and stretch him, and they're going to do this. It's going to be because what they're lining up for is a specific player that they know they can go and get either in free agency, but probably more likely trade because free agency just doesn't really have those players in it this summer. So that's what I think we would be seeing. I don't want anybody to go crazy here and start yelling at me because it didn't work out very well. But similar to what the Milwaukee Bucks did when it was they're getting Miles Turner. It was a whole bunch of moves that they had to make in order to get Miles Turner, but that was a targeted acquisition. They knew, all right, we can get Miles Turner at this number. Now we got to get to how are we going to get to that number to get him? And then that's what they went about doing. I think if you see Detroit go that route, that's the kind of thing that they're setting up for this summer.
I have a quick question on the under the cap route before we go to the over the cap route. So one, biannual exception is no longer available, correct?
Correct.
That is Dennis Jenkins. That's how he got his deal last offseason or during the regular season. So it
doesn't matter over or under, no biannual.
No biannual. And then the room exception is what number? Because I think this comes into play, like as you mentioned, just so everybody listening can understand, whenever you say they don't keep Tobias Harris's cap hold, that means they either have to use the salary cap space to sign him or this exception to sign him. And the only exception under the cap that would be available to them is the room exception, which would be what this year?
Yeah, it projects to be about 9.4 million for this upcoming season.
Okay. And you can sign someone to 3 years on a room exception, right?
Correct.
Max?
Yep.
Okay. So my question then is, Keith, let's not even like go the big route to get to something crazy, like Austin Reeves for 40 million or something like that. Let's just say they need to beat the non-tax MLE. Let's say they need to get to 20 million because they really want Norm Powell or CJ McCollum and I don't know what those guys will go for. What's the most likely path? What's the easiest path to get to 20 million and keep the roster most intact possible to go get, let's say $20 million of cap space to sign one of those guys? Or is that even the right way to do it? Maybe the smarter way to do it is to sign and trade.
Yeah. And so that's a lot to unpack, especially once you throw in that last kind of caveat there. But what you're really looking at is you're making the decision between Do we want $30 million in cap space and the $9 million room exception? Or do we want free agent rights for guys like Harris, Herter, and others? Or do we want that and the non-taxpayer of $15 million? Is that where we want to go? Because the biannual is out the window. So it's now a lot of people would say, give me the $15 million and all my guys. Here's the issue with that's fine. And if that's the direction they go, I'm not even going to be I think that is probably actually the more likely direction, to be honest at this point. The challenge is if you go that direction, the way you're making your big acquisition is via a trade or a sign and trade where the player comes in. And if you do a sign and trade where the player comes in, you're hard capped at the first apron. Shouldn't really be a challenge for the Pistons because they should be in pretty good place with that. But you do have to factor in whatever you do. You're factoring in, we got to save. Right now, we count Jalen Duren at about $19 million. We got to factor in a pretty big number above that. So we got to, with whatever we're doing, we have to factor in the difference there, right? Between whatever he's going to land at and that. So you don't want to kind of, all right, well, we're doing a sign and trade and we're going to use the exception and now we're hard capped and now we're going to, oh no, we have to re-sign Duren and the most we can give him is $20 million. Like, because he's going to get more than that. Even if people hate him, you have to, he's going to get more than $20 million. So I think you're in a place where you have to be really careful with the way you kind of approach that, if that makes sense.
Oh, I will say, Keith, I have my own Pistons cap sheet, just so I can play around with numbers. And I actually had a Pistons fan send me something that they had made where you can play around with the offseason. If anybody's interested in that, DM me and I'll send that link on to you as well. I really appreciated it. But I'm always surprised how close I end up to the first apron. Just doing smaller moves. I just want to go get Rui Hachimura and Norm Powell or something, right? Or John Collins and CJ McCollum or Ayo Dosunmu and Sandro Mamukelishvili. And it's just okay, even after I get rid of some money and make this trade or whatever, I'm man, by the time I give Duren his contract, I'm so close. I'm almost always over the tax and I'm very close to the first apron. And as YouTube user asks, if they use the non-tax MLE, they are then also hard capped to the first apron, correct?
Yeah, it's slightly more complicated in ways that kind of only me cares about. People do what I do, but it is, you have to use more of the non-taxpayer MLE than is allowed to be used using the taxpayer MLE. So the taxpayer MLE allows for $6 million as a projected number in the 2-year contract. So if you use more than $6 million or a contract that runs longer than 2 years, you are hard capped out of that because that can only then come out of the non-taxpayer MLE. So it's funny because it's very hard in a single off season to use cap space and then be dancing around the aprons. How you get there is with things like Jalen Duren, where it would be he gets this massive new contract on top of we used all the cap space and the $9 million room exception. So if they use, hey, we threw $39 million on top and then we threw $40 million on top for Duren. Now all of a sudden it's wait, how are we up near the first apron? And I guarantee that's what you're running into as you run various simulations.
Yeah, YouTube user said this is a tax team next year if they're going to be competitive. I think I agree. I think they probably are a tax team. I guess the other part of it is you can get to the deadline and if the team isn't as good as what they want to be, you can always get back under it. If it's hey, actually we had an injury or something like that. I thought maybe they'd be able to stay under it for one more year before they start getting into that realm of, okay, we're over the tax. We're going to be over the tax. Now we're a repeater team and all of that. And I guess that's ownership questions that can be down the line in terms of what they're willing to pay and what they're not. I have one more question before we go to break.
Can I say one thing on the tax thing real quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Just if let's say they get to trade deadline and they're $2 million over the tax line and it's the difference between trading just picking him because his number's just over 2 million, but trading Chaz Lanier or not. If Chaz Lanier is the Pistons' 14th or 15th man and they trade him to dodge the tax and then they left themselves enough room to fill with a veteran minimum signing by the end of the season and still have 15 players on the roster for the playoffs, people get all bent out of shape about those moves because it's oh, these cheap owners and why would they do this? And my thing is if you're in a position where your 15th man is playing a big role in the playoffs, other things have really gone wrong for you and you're in trouble anyway. So you really I never look at that as a bad thing. And you know me well enough to know, Bryce, I'm not the one who is here these billionaires, let's root for their, bank accounts. Not at all. I'm a big believer in, hey, if you go pay the tax, but I'm also a big believer in if you're close enough to get out of the tax, you might as well. Now, what I hold the ownership accountable to, and I would expect Pistons should as well is, Pistons fans rather should, is if we dodge the tax, when it comes time to pay it, remember when we didn't those other times, now you better be willing to next time. And I will say this ownership group has paid the tax. Not a ton, but they have paid the tax at times. So I think we're in a place where, I would cut them a little slack if they make a tax avoidance move or two.
Well, holding it off 1 year could end up being a lot of money in terms of when the repeater kicks in, right? If you hold it off one more year, now instead of paying 2 or 3 times 3 or 4 years from now, you're only paying 1 or 2 times that number whenever you really get expensive, right?
Exactly.
And I know I'm just throwing out I'm not giving specific numbers here, but that's why it would make sense for me that if they are even close to it, to dodge it for 1 more year might make sense. Might. I'm not saying they have to, but might. One more question. I did throw out some names. I don't want to get into the names crazy right now, but do you think there would be a necessary advantage to having more than the non-tax MLE and cap space this offseason? Do the names of CJ McCollum, Norm Powell, John Collins, Rui Hachimura, a lot of these names that Pistons fans are talking about, do you think those guys go for more than the non-tax MLE, which would then allow Detroit to be a bigger player in acquiring them than if they were over the cap and only have the 15-point whatever? Is there enough of those guys where it's hey, maybe we can separate ourselves here because we're one of these teams that actually has more than that to offer a free agent?
Yeah, I think there's a chance a couple of those guys go for more than the non-tax MLE, only because I think what you're going to see with a couple of those players like Norman Powell could probably get more than that just by re-signing with the Heat.
Staying home.
Even if it was only for a year. Same thing with someone like Rui Hachimura could be in a position where if the Lakers are finding themselves with, they don't even go the cap space route, then definitely I think Hachimura's I could probably get what I had last year, maybe even slightly more, because apparently throughout the course of the playoffs, he became the best shooter on the planet. So that is, one way you could kind of look at that. So I think those are a couple guys. And then McCollum, seems like the Hawks really want to keep him by re-signing again. And it may not even be a lot more. It might be 18 to 20 million, but it's still more, right? And a couple of those guys were down to kind of playing on shorter term contracts because of age-wise. So now here's where that changes. If you wanted to have any shot in the world at getting 2 of those players, then you have to go the cap space route. You're not getting 2 of them for splitting the non-taxpayer or getting one on that and another guy on the minimum or anything like that. So you just have to be a little bit more cautious about that, if that's the way you want to go. So you're kind of picking between, maybe we get one of these guys and then maybe we could, then fill out in other ways, re-sign a couple guys, whatever. Or you're looking at maybe we can be in play of 2 of those guys, and you're definitely in play of getting 2 of them if we have 30 million in space, and we're also going to get off of Karis LeVert's contract or something like that. Then now all of a sudden you're probably in play to get a couple of those guys.
Rui Hachimura, literally the NBA leader in 3-point percentage for players who have attempted at least 100 threes in their career in the playoffs.
Not
the leader. Crazy. I did like I said, I'm doing these off-season it's not even previews. It's just breaking players down over on the Substack. And when I came across, I had to look it back. It's kind of fun to do these, Keith. I did Kyrie Irving. I think that one's coming out tomorrow. Do you know for the last 5 seasons, obviously he didn't play last year, Kyrie has almost averaged 50, 40, 90 shooting splits. I stopped in the middle of my recording, Keith, and looked it up because I was like, this isn't right. And I'm going to look like an idiot. And sure enough, it's 49, 40, 89 average over the last 5 seasons played. Just ridiculous stuff. So,
one thing on Kyrie.
Yeah.
When all is said and done, we can have just basketball conversations about Kyrie Irving.
Correct.
We are going to remember him as maybe the best finisher for a player of his size.
Yes.
In the NBA. Doesn't have like a ton of posters or things like that, but wildly creative around the basket and insanely efficient. For a guy who is 6'2", 6'3", if we're being generous, to shoot 50% from the field without it being on an insanely high volume of three-pointers that he also shoots well on, just ridiculous stuff. I mean, just a really, really special player. And I'll pause there to just say, I don't think Dallas is trading him. I would be shocked if the Mavs move him.
So I've been very I try to be very transparent with these previews I'm doing or whatever this series is. I'm not pushing narratives. I'm not predicting. I'm literally just giving names. And I actually put out a poll for that one. Like, hey, let's go with the big name and people pick Kyrie over Austin Reeves and a couple other players. Let's go to break. When we come back, I do want to go over the cap. I want to go over that aspect of things because it does seem like the more likely path. So we'll go into the over the cap path right after this. All right, Keith, we're back here. We broke down a whole bunch of stuff there, and I want us to keep moving along because I do want to talk NBA draft with you. I love Omari so much, one of my favorite people in the world, a great friend, but I was a little nervous, like how much is he going to let us talk NBA draft on this episode? And now that he's not here, me and you can just talk about pick 21 and all of that for the last 10 or 15 minutes. So over the cap means they keep all of these cap holds and then it just becomes an order of operations thing. What does that mean? What mechanisms do they have left? All of that.
Yeah, if you're operating over the cap, order of operations doesn't really matter anymore.
Okay.
You can kind of do it in whatever order you want, provided you're not hard capping yourself with anything you do. And that's if you hard cap yourself, you can't go over it, or there might be things you can't do. If you're already over those lines. So, yeah, so in that case, you're keeping Harris's cap hold on the books and keeping your rights to re-sign him. You're doing the same with Kevin Huerter. And I know it's very easy for people to be like, why would they re-sign Kevin Huerter? He didn't do anything for the team. He hasn't really done anything in a year. Part of what you might re-sign him for is, let's say they gave him $10 million. People might be like, that's crazy. $10 million. What are you doing? It's $10 million a tradable salary. Right, that you might not have had otherwise. You keep Duncan Robinson. At that point, I would say at that point, if he stays, you consider him at his full salary amount, which is $15.99 million, roughly $16 million. And why I say that is you can always guarantee more of his contract if you wanted to put him in a trade. Then you have only the non-taxpayer to use, but you also have your draft pick and you also have minimum contracts. Minimum contracts, this is where I think Pistons fans probably need to reframe their thinking a little bit, maybe. When the Pistons were bad, minimum contracts were take a flyer on this guy and see if he pops. Now it is, we're good. We're in the mix to be a contender. Now it is, what veteran can we add that can give us 10 to 15 minutes a night on a minimum contract? When players are taking a minimum contract, they look at, because the money is the same. So they look at two things: opportunity to play and contribute, or it is the opportunity to play in a market they really want to play in. Detroit, much like Boston and any other northern market that isn't New York, they have a little bit of trouble with that because you've been around enough NBA players, Bryce. None of them want to live anywhere cold. Even if they grew up somewhere cold, they don't want to be there. Like it's pretty rare. So
really
what you really
hear,
kind of looking at,
real quick, like it's truly something you hear from players is like,
all the time.
I don't want to be some. Now they still make these decisions, right, to go play there, but if like everything else is equal, they're gonna pick the place that's warmer.
Yep. And then the last thing is, can I be a part of a winner? Well, that's an easy answer. Yes, you could be a part of a winner. Pistons, yeah, probably have a real role for you to actually play. Then if guys are kind of, they're like, all right, I can do without the weather. That's fine. All-Star break hits that same night. I'm out on off to a beach, right? Like it's fine. So that's where you kind of get to a place where it is like all things being equal, they're going to be shopping on a different level of player on the minimum than they have been in the past. These are guys who can actually play. You're not betting on potential and upside. You're really just getting somebody pretty good.
I do want to ask about this because I've seen it in the chat, and quite honestly, Keith, I haven't done a whole lot looking into Isaac Monga and what is that what is the deal that they have with him? How is that all going to work? Again, I'll be honest, like I haven't looked into the film to kind of see what he's bringing in regards to that. But also I haven't really looked into what that contract was. It kind of was reported in a weird time where were we still in the regular season or the play? Like there were still games going on. So it's kind of like, okay, I'll put this in the back of my mind to come back to. And unfortunately, I haven't got back to it yet. So maybe we can touch on that here a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple things. So I have been kind of tracking Isaac Bonga over the last couple of years. It's become a real shooter.
Okay.
That was like the real question. Is this guy ever going to actually shoot? And if you maybe weren't doing this then, you might have still been playing back then. But when he was a teenager before he came to the NBA, Isaac Bonga couldn't shoot at all. It was all athleticism. And it's like, yeah, this guy maybe becomes something. Then he spent a few years in the NBA and there were flashes on occasion, but never really got there. And kind of like we see a lot of these guys who are super athletic kind of play their way out. Now, we were just talking about like the 40-90 guys.
Yeah.
Over the last several years in the EuroLeague, it been playing fairly high level for both Bayern Munich and Partizan. He's been near 50% from the field, 40% from three, pushing up against it, and then about 80% from on free throws. So you really are like, all right, this guy can play. And he's got great size. He's like a legit 6'8" or so, I would say, for a wing. Pretty solid defensively still. Just a nice player. Here's what I'll say is, Pistons better not have an actual plan for how they're signing him, because that'd be all kinds of not okay and illegal, even though he's coming from outside the NBA. You can't really do that. Now, we're all grown-ups here. We know how it works. So that's why you've heard nothing from the Pistons. And if you were to, if Trajan Langdon did media availability in 5 minutes and you asked him, hey, what's going on with Isaac Bonga? He would be like, he's going to give you some form of answer that is like, well, I can't talk about any specific players, but we always look worldwide for talent, right? Like the most canned answer you're ever going to get. My guess is he's either coming back on the minimum, which often happens with these guys who come back to the NBA from Europe, or it's going to be, we're going to give you just say $5 million in year one, which we can either get you as part of the room exception or part of the non-taxpayer, whatever direction we go. Or if we had some leftover cap space, there's a number that they all feel good about, and that's the number he's coming in at. What that number is, I have absolutely no idea. I would be shocked if it's any more than like $5 to $7 million. It just would seem to be that seems to be taking a little bit of a risk that I don't know that they would want to commit to that much. But that's probably what's going on with that situation.
Okay, I want to ask about Jalen Duren and Ausar Thompson now. And Keith, I'm not even going to put you in you can answer it whichever way you want, I guess. I feel like sometimes it's easier to just say, this is what you think is going to happen. But if you want to say what you would give either of those guys, like that's up to you. I'll give you the choice here. Sometimes anymore, I like to just talk about like, hey, this is what I think is going to happen. Let's start with Jalen Duren. What ultimately, like, where is the number? You can even give us a range here. Like, I know sometimes these things can get like put out. Like Keith Smith said on the Pistons Pulse that, hey, if that drives that drives a bunch of listeners to it, then like I appreciate you helping us out, Keith. But no, like, where do you think this thing goes? Because before the playoffs, it seemed way easier than what happened after the playoffs, and where does this land now? I feel like there is probably I think there is a sweet spot where both sides can come away maybe a little bit not happy, but also a little bit like, okay, we can live with this.
Yeah. And earlier, I professed that I'm a big fan of Jalen Duren, right? Like, and have been for a while. That doesn't mean I'm giving him $300 million. No, I'm not but that's not even a starting point. His agent should absolutely ask for that, like the minute he's able to. And Trajan Langdon should say, can we get serious? Or like, let's just move along. So if I'm Jalen Duren and the Pistons, what feels about right to me, and I'm on record with this, I put this out there on social media, 5,185 feels like a fair number to me. That's about $37 million annually. If you were the Pistons, you could play with that a couple different ways. You could either, because they don't really have super huge issues. I don't think they're going to with the tax and the hard caps and the aprons and all that this year. So you could give him a little bit more up front and go like 37 million flat. That's what the Hawks did with both Jalen Johnson and with Dyson Daniels. Their contracts run flat. Why players in teams like that is, players generally don't like the declining contract where it starts high and goes down, because it can be hard if let's say they're awesome. Let's say Jalen Duren gets whatever's, getting him in the playoffs. Next year, he's like this monster in the playoffs. What can happen is, if by the time he's at the end of that contract, it might not be big enough to extend off of. And that gets really hard.
For the Portland Trailblazers.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And it's funny because I have had to change my thinking on those as extensions have become more and more of the thing. I used to be like, what an awesome contract, right? As the team gets more expensive, the guy's number goes down. It's great till you have to extend them. Then all of a sudden it's like, uh-oh. So you get that part of it. The next part is the flat number kind of bridges the gap, right? Because then it's, as the team gets more expensive, your number doesn't change. You're just locked in at your number. In this case, it'd be $37 million a year, and that's what it is. So that's where I would really kind of look at with Duren is, that's not even the 25% of the cap max. And I think you have to just be very, very careful if you're the Pistons, because you've already got Cade on his max. And boy, are they thankful now that they got him for only 25% of the cap and not 30. But then with Ausar Thompson, that's looming. So Duren has to be done right now, right? Like they're kind of like priority 1 and 1A, because they both have to get kind of done at the same time. But with Thompson, you could at least say, you know what, we're going to let it play out like we did with Duren. We can't reach mutual agreement. You kind of have that buffer. With Duren, you got to get something hammered out now, because the worst thing that could happen would be, I don't want this to turn into a Kuminga, Giddey situation where it's just where these guys are languishing in restricted free agency deep into the summer. Whenever he's like, no one can make a reasonable play for him. No one's going to. So you just want to be kind of careful. And the Lakers could be looming out there to throw a big offer sheet at him. Sean Marks, I don't know that they really need a center, but maybe they do. They might be like, you know what, we've screwed around with other teams. Cap sheets before, let's do it again. And the Bulls don't even have don't have anybody, right? Like, I think you have to kind of, go in that direction too of, hey, somebody could make this really difficult on us. So I would try to get this done before that process even happens. And $37 million a year feels right.
Okay. So let's build off of that. Ultimately, let's just look at the big numbers. As you mentioned, Cade Cunningham, $50 million in 26, 27, and that's going up by $3 or $4 million every year. Let's say this Jalen Duren deal gets done around 37, and let's just say it's the flat number, okay? What is the number for Ausar Thompson I want to keep this team building perspective, Keith, because this is where I ultimately land is, I am not team trade Jalen Duren or Ausar Thompson. I still have some concerns about things offensively, but ultimately I'm not ready to move on from either one of those guys. My worry is if you have Jalen Duren for $40+ million and Ausar Thompson for $35+ million, and then now you're really expensive and you kind of have this flaw on your team where, hey, we need a number 2 scoring option, but we can't get one because those guys cost $30 million and we don't have $30 million. So what is the number for Ausar then, where it's like you still feel comfortable in terms of your team building?
So I've been thinking a lot about this. And one of the things I do every year is I write a rookie scale extension projection piece. And it's not like I'm spoiling it. So I would just kind of put it out there here. Feel like about $27 million a year is kind of that's where I feel comfortable with Ausar Thompson, only because you start going much more. So use Dyson Daniels as kind of the baseline for that kind of player. And I think Dyson Daniels in some ways is a far more helpful offensive player because he can handle the ball and pass a little bit more. That's honestly, I know everybody focuses on the jump shot, but we were sold on the Thompson twins coming in because they were both going to be like big point guard types. Amen has gotten there, right? He's a really good ball handler and playmaker. Ausar's never really kind of gotten there. And I know he was always seen as more of the off-ball player, the more run and jump athlete. Not that Amen isn't an incredible athlete, but just a little bit different. So 27 million is about where I feel pretty comfortable because that puts you in a place where even if he becomes nothing more than he is right now, which is a super high-end defensive player who is basically an offense. He's going to have to score off cuts and fast breaks and putbacks and those kind of things with the very occasional jumper mixed in. That still feels okay to me because you're paying for, at that point, you're paying for first team level all defense play. Anything more than that starts to be, if he can't be on the floor at the end of crucial playoff games because of the offense, I don't know that I can pay him more than that. Like it is, I say this all the time, and maybe Pistons fans in this kind of like rebirth here is they're not going to like hearing this, but offense is simply way more important than defense. Just is. We've seen it in every single playoff series. You can hide one bad defender if you need to. You cannot hide with one or two multiple players on the floor that can't shoot. I don't think Jalen Duren's ever going to be a threat to shoot from three. And I don't care if he's making mid-rangers because teams will just live with those. If you have two non-shooters on the floor in offense, unless you somehow find a way to acquire Stephen Curry and Stephen Curry's clone as your other two starters alongside Cade, good luck figuring it out. You're just going to struggle to get there. So that's why about $27 million feels right to me.
Yeah.
For him.
No, I mean, I've come around on that those two guys can fit together. It's just, it is going to be a little bit unique. It's going to be a little bit different. And like, it does have to be better than what we saw in the playoffs, obviously. So, all right, I want to talk draft. I don't know that anybody else wants to talk draft. I want to talk draft. And ultimately, I've been covering this team for like 6 years now. And I think after 234 episodes, I think I can make this decision. So Wes might be mad at me. Omari might be mad at me. The Free Press might be mad at me, but I want to talk NBA draft. Wes, are there some questions that we need to answer? I saw there's some things start. Okay, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we'll answer those questions first because I obviously very much appreciate everybody who's here live. And then we'll get into some draft prospects, Keith, in that 21 pick 21 range. We'll get into that right after this. Oh yeah, there's some good ones here. So we'll start with YouTube user. I'd like to see Detroit get involved with either Denver or the OKC roster / cap crunch. Who from each team do you think is most likely to be moved? So Denver, this is obviously the tax conversation that we had earlier about ownership. And then Oklahoma City literally doesn't have a roster spot with 2 first-round draft picks. Not that that's a bad situation to be in, but just decisions to be made. One name from either team, Keith, that you think would be really good for them.
Yeah, the question here, they listed the names. I think Lou Dort's time in OKC is probably coming to an end. I know there was reporting that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to say, hey, that's my guy. We play for Team Canada together. Like, that's my buddy in the locker room. And I think Sam Presti will be like, yeah, you also like Trey Mann, and I traded him and we won a title. No, there's not an exact correlation there, but I think Sam Presti's thing is going to be, would you like to keep winning championships here or contending for them? Can't keep everybody. Somebody's going to go. I don't love Lou Dort for the Pistons. Now, if Lou Dort is just, they decline that team option and let him go do that route, yeah, if you could get him in free agency at a reasonable number, non-taxpayer or less, sure. I just think Lou Dort, he's been falling off offensively. And like, you already have Ausar Thompson, who is, in my opinion, at this point, everything Lou Dort does, but better, younger, and cheaper. Cheaper for another year, but still, like, better. Cam Johnson, yeah, interesting. Didn't go well for him with the Nuggets. He's the kind of guy you take a flyer on where it's like, can we get him back to some level of what he was with the Nets? I think what's forgotten, and I think part of why it didn't go so well for him with the Nuggets is Cam Johnson was really in a true off-ball mode with the Nuggets, whereas he kind of grew with the Suns and then really grew with the Nets. He had the ball in his hands. I think he's a guy who can do some scoring with the ball in his hands. And if it doesn't work out, his contract expires and you move on and say, well, it didn't work. It goes there. Christian Braun, my worry is, one, like everybody else, is he just a Jokic merchant? Like, does he live off Jokic and goes anywhere else? Is it going to be nearly as good? There's a lot of money owed to him. So that I would stay away from him.
I actually did the Cam Johnson over on the Substack breakdown, and I keep it was a good reminder of like some of the things he's able to do, like offensively. And when you talk about this team needing more ball handling, I don't think you think Cam Johnson, but we've seen Cam Johnson do that in a secondary role. Alec,
it's one thing, and I know you know this, but it's just worth saying. It is really hard for a player to go from being either the primary on-ball guy, which Cam Johnson was with the Nets, even in bad Nets teams, to being, hey, you're like the third or fourth option and like you're going to get all your stuff off of actions and anything else. It's really hard. And yeah, maybe the ball comes your way every 3 or 4 trips for something, even if we do directly run a play for you. Because then how many times have you seen it? This guy hasn't had a touch. We're going to run a play for him. And then the other team blows it up. And now it's another 5 possessions before the guy gets a quality touch. It's really, really hard for a player to go from that to that less of a role. It's why, it's always a good reminder. It's about collecting players who fit, not just collecting talent.
We're going to bring that back up when we talk about the draft prospects, actually, because I think a couple names Pistons fans really like. I think that becomes a conversation as well, but we'll get to that in a second. Alex says, how big of a swing do the Pistons actually make this year? Some are saying we run it back with small upgrades. Others are saying Trey Murphy, Lauri Markkanen. I guess my question to you, Keith, is what do you think we see, or what would you do? I think you can answer it either way. I will also just say, I don't understand the Lauri Markkanen trade push now.
Yeah, it's not happening.
To me, it makes less sense than it did 12 months ago. They made not their all-in move, but they made their big move. And to me, Lauri Markkanen, Jaren Jackson Jr., Walker Kessler, I like that all when they're together more than I do if you take one of them out of the equation. So I've pushed Lauri Markkanen off the board in terms of the big move discussion.
Yeah, just forget about it. Not happening. Lauri Markkanen's not. I would be shocked if he is traded in anything other than as a means for the Jazz to get an even better player. Jazz have no interest in prospects and picks and all that stuff. Trey Murphy? Yeah, there's a lot of buzz that the Pelicans might move him. Now, the Pelicans, it's like everybody, right? It's Bryce, one of my favorite movies is Moneyball.
Oh, yeah.
And there's I love that guy. I like that guy. It's like, you don't even know who that guy is. Obviously, you know who Trey Murphy is, but it's the Pelicans are telling everybody they like everybody they have on their roster. And that's a lot of love for a team that won 25 games. That's all I'll say. Something may happen there. Yeah, if you could get Trey Murphy at a decent cost, it's probably going to cost you Thompson, I would guess. And then that gets weird on the Pelican side because you already have Herb Jones, and how are you going to play those two guys together? Although the idea of those two guys on defense on the wing is a coach's dream and every other coach's nightmare. But if you could get them reasonably, how big of a swing? I think they're going to go moderately big on trying to do something, but I think it's going to be more doing something that rounds out the depth in a better way of what they need. So more shooting, more playmaking, all that. So that's where when we're talking about maybe you go and get a couple guys, I think it might be more of that versus adding one big time player.
Okay, last one, and then we'll get to the draft. Michael says, maybe not a fair question for Keith, but looking at the Pistons assets, what is the most desirable in terms of Isaiah Stewart? You mentioned, flat contract. Isaiah Stewart, I think, has 2 more years at $30 million with a club option, $15 million. Is it their draft picks? I actually brought this up the other day. Do we even know the value of draft picks under the new lottery reform? Are people going to be willing to trade draft picks after 2029 when we literally do not know? The NBA has told us, Keith, we don't know what the lottery odds system will be after 2029. Are you going to be a GM willing to give up a pick past that and then end up being the Memphis Grizzlies right now under the current format? Or is it Holland in a year 3 value? So I know that's a lot to kind of hash out, but what do you think of the reasonable, not Cade Cunningham? Let's take Jalen Duren, Ausar Thompson off the table here. Is it the draft picks? Is there one of these players you think would be really desirable to other teams? What do you think?
Yeah, well, and to add to the draft pick, these old draft pick all-in moves where it was 4 first for a superstar player, with some of the rules on can have back-to-back number 1 picks, can only be in the top 5, and all these other rules that are in there. Teams don't even want that many picks from one team anymore. That could be a whole thing. Really, really feels like it's going to be a place where it is going Like, how do I put this? It's going to take us about 2 full years of transaction cycles, starting with this year's draft through the offseason, through the trade deadline, and then one more year to really have a handle on what are teams doing with these picks, right? Like that's going to be how that goes. So that's my long way of leading into. For me, it's Ron Holland, and it's not even close. Isaiah Stewart fell off this year. Wasn't as impactful of a defender. There are teams that are, let's just say they're wary of the whole, is he going to keep getting in trouble? Like, is that going to be a thing that happens? There are teams who love it, but it's more like, hey, we love it, but let's kind of tone that down a little with that. So, and then there's the whole thing of like, is he more than just a really nice 6-man big, like off the bench, like third big in your rotation, that, and then the draft picks. Yeah. So for me, it's Holland. I know there are teams still really, really like Ron Holland. Their question is going to be, all right, him and Thompson, there's too much overlap there. Can't really play together. What do we do? So that's going to be a big question mark going forward.
All right. Before we get into this, I will let the listeners know next week we will talk general offseason again. That'll give Omari a chance to do it since he missed this with us today. And then 2 weeks from now, we'll be bringing on a couple guys from No Ceilings, Corey and Maxwell, and we're going to do a mock draft type of thing. Like we'll end up making all the picks, but it will be a little bit unique. We'll fast forward things for you into the range for Detroit and talk about trade ups and some different things like that. But Keith, let's just talk pick 21 here. I don't want to get into the trade up stuff today. I know we can. Like I understand why people want to. Yaxel Lindeborg, Cameron Carr, those guys are absolutely worthy conversations, and I get it. But we got 5 or 10 minutes here. Let's just stay at pick 21. So I tell you, within reason, pick 21, you're making the selection. Who is the player? What is the name that pops off to you immediately for Detroit? Again, taking anybody that's probably going to go lottery or whatever kind of off the table here.
Yeah, I think I'd be okay with going almost anywhere aside from a true center, just because to me, that's Duren. And like, I don't want, like, if he slipped that far, I don't want a Dame Mara. Like, I don't think they're going to be able to play together in a reasonable way in the NBA. So I'd be around that pick. I'm looking slide a little. Like, I like the idea. Christian Anderson, Baron Philon, those guys. Isaiah Evans, I think I'm higher by a little bit on than most. Like I've got him kind of early 20s on my board. Cam Carr, I think could be a guy. Sounds like he is one of the big risers right now going, but that's a couple guys that are kind of like wingish players that I think could be good. I really like Alan Graves a lot. I think he's going to be a really, really good player and can do a lot of different things. And I think could kind of be the 4-man of the future for Detroit, where he could do a lot of stuff. Hannes Steinbach, if he's still available, big who can stretch the floor some with his shooting. I love Merez Johnson. That one gets a little weird because I think if I felt like Merez Johnson was going to be a shooter, like able to knock down threes at a decent clip, I would be 100% in on him. Like, but then everybody would have him as a lottery pick, so he wouldn't even be there, right? Like, it's if a guy could do all these things, he'd be the top pick in the draft, right? If you go with true guards, he's a little older, but I think the Pistons aren't so much in the youth development. Bennett Sturts, I think, could be a decent player in that range.
So I had 2 names I wanted to throw at you. So let's start with Sturts, and then I want to throw another one to you as well. What do you like about Sturts? What would you think about? And I do think, Keith, when we have these conversations about bringing in a guard, obviously Cade Cunningham's the most important conversation. I do think Danis Jenkins is part of this conversation. I'm not saying you don't acquire a player because of Danis Jenkins, but I do think you have to have part of the equation is not only how Bennett Sturts plays with Cade Cunningham, but how would Bennett Sturts then share the floor with Danis Jenkins? I think Danis is versatile enough. It probably doesn't end up mattering a whole lot, but how do you think Sturts would fit into that role playing alongside those guys? And then if Karras is still here, Duncan or whoever.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting with Sturts. I liked this year because I had a couple other guys. We got to see he can do a little bit off ball, right? Like there's some stuff in there in his game with that. So I think that is going to be interesting. You got to have a lot of ball handling and playmaking to win, at the highest levels in the NBA. I mean, even look at the Knicks. The Knicks, because Towns is a really good playmaker for a big man. It's Brunson, it's Towns, it's McBride. Even Jordan Clarkson has gotten a lot of run for them. So you need that. And then Spurs have a million guys. OKC has a million guys. It can handle the ball. So I like Sturts because I think you could play him with Cunningham. Then I think in the stretches when Cunningham sits, he could kind of lead the offense that way. I think Dennis Jenkins, I'm a big fan of Dennis Jenkins. You think he's a little bit more of a scorer than a guy who's going to run your offense. So I think in an ideal world, he's either coming on, starting if you had a couple more shooters, or he is coming off the bench as like a super high-end sixth man. So that's and with Sturts, I think too, he's kind of this is a weird term, but kind of a rugged ball handler. I think he's got a pretty good build and handle where I don't know that a lot of physicality bothers him all that much. Like, I think he's just still going to get to where he needs to get to on the floor. With that, I obviously worry about his foot speed a little. I worry about his defense. I mean, I'm trying not to dip too deep into the typical white guard trope here, but I mean, some of that is there.
So the last name I want to bring up here, and then we'll let you go, is a name I continue to hear a lot of Pistons fans bring up, especially when you get into the need more ball handling, rim pressure, all of that. So I'm curious where you are at on Abuka Okori out of Stanford, just in general, and then what your thoughts are specifically with Abuka Okori on the Detroit Pistons.
I love his makeup and the way he his floor presence and command of the team. I do worry a little bit about his size. Like, I'm just a little nervous that I don't know. I'm not sure he's going to get a shot off a lot at the NBA level, and I'm a little bit worried about that. That said, I don't have him like way out of range for where the Pistons are picking. Like, if you told me Jacoby Gillespie, I'd be like, that's insane. Like, no chance. I have a Corey, I have 26. So that's fine, right? When you're within 5 picks after 20, you're kind of eye of the beholder kind of stuff. We see somebody, we see something in this guy than somebody else does. So I like him. I kind of worry that his ceiling is third guard, but for a pick in the 20s, that's not necessarily the worst outcome. Just kind of wonder, is it just going to be like another version of Marcus Sasser, where it's like there's moments where it looks really good, but a lot of the time it's can't really get a shot off, can't blow by guys, isn't going to do that. And then defensively, I do worry a little bit about the size.
It's funny you bring up Sasser because I do think they're a little bit different players. Like Abuka really pressures the rim. You know what I mean? And so Sasser, especially in the NBA, has been more of like just a guy that really, knocks down threes off the dribble and all of that.
Very
different, but the same idea of, okay, they're kind of more trying to go get their own buckets than necessarily creating for others, but they're getting buckets with the ball in their hands. And so sometimes I do worry about, okay, well, how is that going to fit? And to your point, though, maybe at 21, it's okay if he doesn't fit extremely well with Cade Cunningham. He's just a guy that you go to in non-Cade Cunningham minutes, and he's the guy that can really kind of dominate the ball and generate offense, even if it is more so for him. And so in that way, maybe I have to remove the idea of him playing with Cade because I think he would really push Cade off the ball even more than what I would want him to. So that's where I'm at. We'll get more NBA draft stuff for you guys here in a couple weeks. I don't want to keep Keith too long. This always seems to happen, but this was awesome as always. I know you have stuff to get to because you just got back from that vacation. So I want to be respectful of your time. Please let everybody know where they can take in your off-season content and beyond, where they can find you, all of that stuff. Because I know everybody really, really appreciates and respects what you come on here and the knowledge you give them.
Appreciate that. We are 15 off-season previews deep on spottrack.com. We're into the playoff teams now with that. So we've got all that out there. It'll be a bit before we get to the Pistons because we go in order of elimination. So that's a good thing. It means your season wasn't over right away. Wasn't over in the lottery and wasn't there. So that's where that goes. And then then I'll have even more stuff, free agent previews coming out on there. I'll have, like you said, that rookie scale extension piece Obviously, we talked about Ausar Thompson, but I'll talk about everybody in there with that. And then if you're more of a visual watch or listen person, NBA Front Office Show, Trevor Lane and I, now is our time. This is when we really ramp up content in season. We go about 3 times a week. Off season, we tend to pick up even more as more news comes out and all that stuff. So it'll be a really busy off season for us. So super excited for all that. But yeah, you can find it there. NBA Front Office Show on YouTube or anywhere you listen to podcasts, and all my written content over on SpotTrack.
Awesome. Thank you, Keith. Real quick, shameless plug from me. Go check out the Motor City Hoops Substack. I'm doing a series over there looking at potential offseason acquisitions. I'm not pushing narratives. I'm not pushing ideas. I'm literally just giving you guys an overview of players based on stats, synergy numbers, contract numbers from SpotTrack, and then my raw game notes from watching those players over the last couple of seasons. It's got pretty good, feedback thus far. So I'll continue to do as many of those as I can. We'll be back sometime next week with another overall offseason preview, I think, right, Wes? We're still just kind of looking big picture offseason. The week after that, we'll have a couple of the guys from No Ceilings to do an NBA draft thing. And then we're like a week away from the draft. We're, at that point, a couple weeks from free agency. Keith, I had to book my summer league stuff yesterday. Like, it was time to do that. So I'll be out in Vegas here in the little over a month. Will you be going this year?
We're going to cross paths.
Yes.
Because I'm coming early.
Thank you.
This year.
Keith and I have never met in person. Like, that's what's wild. Keith and I we've interacted for 3 or 4 years now. We have each other's phone numbers for a couple years where we'll text, again, not just basketball, just life stuff. We'll just check in like, hey, how's life? Never met in person. That's what's wild about this space sometimes. You meet amazing people. I was telling someone the other day, Keith, I think I've only met Wes once in person. Wes has been with me for like 5 years now. We've met one time in person.
It's crazy.
So anyway, if you guys are out of Summer League, I know Keith and Trevor always say that walk up to them, say hello. Same with me. Highly recommend. It's a crazy time out there. So I got to get Keith out of here. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Wes, I guess you're going to take it away on today's episode. O2 will be back with us next week.